Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep, so before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. My friend found an ancient Norse barrow. They never came back. The jet-black, time-worn edifice jutted from the waters of the sea, dripping with seawater rolling off the eaves and pillars. The evening sun shimmered on the water, imbuing it with a warm hue of red and yellow that sharply contrasted the structure, an ancient, long-forgotten mound of rough, barnacle-encrusted and seaweed-littered tumulus made of stone. Look at it. How amazing. Astrid, my friend, exclaimed, pointing at the mound which had just recently and suddenly emerged out of the water as the sun fell below the horizon. Her blonde hair, braided to a single braid at the back of her neck, flew with the seaside breeze. She slightly turned around to look at us, offering a glance of her bright blue eyes. "Do you know what this is?" Solveig asked me, rubbing her head. She pointed to that thing from the sea again. "It's a barrow," I explained. I framed my fingers towards that structure, mimicking a camera. "It looks very old and has been submerged for a long time." "This is so crazy," Liv exclaimed. "One minute, we're chilling on this beach, enjoying the scenery at eventide. The next, some kind of ancient magically rises out of the sea like some big whale. It happened all of a sudden. We found a pristine, secluded beach in Norway. It wasn't anything spooky or unusual or cursed, like those cheesy horror flicks. It was just a scenic spot Astrid was familiar with, and situated near her hometown. It was a perfect place to bask and relax after those intense exams we did at our university. We were so burned out after having to study all-nighters in the days leading to our final examination. The quietness and natural surroundings of the place, the blue seas, the white sands, and the clear yet cool skies was a break with the stuffy, urban locales of the city. All of us put on our swimsuits as we swam in the water, sunbathed under the cold sun, and even took a stroll across this place. We thought it could be the perfect time, an uneventful yet enjoyable time. But then suddenly, the ground quaked with such force alongside a great frigid gale and the seas turning rough. It was so intense that we thought we're going to die and hugged each other, fearing the worst to come. Thank the Lord an actual tsunami didn't happen. Instead, over the horizon, an ancient barrow emerged from the sea almost immediately, in front of our eyes. "Come on, gals," Astrid eagerly exclaimed, waving her hand as she trotted towards the water. "Let's explore it." "Are you out of your mind?" I chided. "That's an actual, honest-to-God, future archaeological site. We shouldn't delve until we can bring proof to the university or some organization. Then it'll be excavated and investigated properly." Ingrid, our foreign friend, said, "Think of it as an opportunity to spice up our last day of vacation." "I agree with her," Astrid said. "You agree with her? Are you crazy?" I was outraged. I pointed at our friend with a condescending glance. "Last time, we got into trouble for drinking a lot and having to do community service for our university. You're seriously considering entering this place?" "Why not?" Astrid said with a confident and proud smile. "I'm of an adventurous kind. A little thrill wouldn't hurt a bit. After all, we're sisters, though not in the blood-related kind way. Let's go with our bikinis and all." Despite my reservations against her decision, considering the age and undiscovered nature of this barrow, I decided to follow her, if only to stop her and her friends from causing more damage or getting into trouble. We waded through the sea on a raised causeway leading towards the barrow, shoulder deep in it. Astrid and the others were chatting and giggling so fully, but I was really apprehensive and trepid about it. The oddly smoothed black gravel and the matching black sand that composed this inexplicable causeway felt both weirdly silky and harsh. On my soles, not helping was the coldness of the water that splashed against my face and glasses. As we got closer to the barrow, I suddenly felt cold and a foreboding presence pierced into the back of my head. Astrid paced up, climbing up the well-worn grey steps, stained black from muck, algae and damp. She helped pull out Selvig, her long black hair stringy and dripping, complementing her black bikini. "Hurry up, sisters." Astrid beckoned as Liv and I waded towards their direction. "The water's getting cold," I said. "I think we should turn back." Liv turned around and glanced at me. She briefly stopped to talk as she started adjusting her loose bun. "It's fine. That's the fun of swimming in this country," she replied. "Trust me, Astrid has swum in waters colder than this. She can last 11 minutes at the bottom of the coldest lake with only a bikini on." I managed to reach the steps of the barrow. Emerging out of the water, my body quivered, which I staggered, trying to gain a foothold. I nearly slipped on a loose, small piece of masonry, but Astrid grabbed me luckily and pulled me up. Yet, my glasses, an old piece I've been using since I was a kid, slipped off my ears. In haste, I grabbed it instinctively and placed it back, hurriedly adjusting it. "Haven't you got another pair lately?" Solvig teased. "Yeah," Astrid replied. "This thing could have broken in any time if it fell off again. Maybe you should buy new pairs when we return to the city." There was a loud gasp coming from behind. I turned around to see an exhausted Liv climb up the steps after emerging out of the water. She was smiling as if she was exhilarated, yet exhausted from wading cold water. She lightly adjusted the top of her light blue bikini with floral patterns as she looked around. "Allow me to help," I said, approaching her with my hands ready to pick her up. I grabbed one of Liv's arms, extended with her hand outstretched, and pulled her out of the water. She briefly stood before stumbling and staggering, nearly landing on the rocky ground if it weren't for her timely pat on the ground with her hands. The shoreline seemed very far away, almost 2 miles from shore, with the sands fading into the misty horizon. The waves just undulated as usual, shimmering with golden light in the evening. The seabirds' cries calmed down, softly segueing into the coastal ambience. "Is everyone here?" Astrid asked, boldly posing with her hand over her brow. Looking at her, I can't help but gaze at her beautiful yet athletic physique, with fair skin that was accentuated by her red bikini with golden trims. "Why you're looking at me like that?" She suddenly snapped at me. Immediately, I stopped doing that adoring look and adjusted my glasses to see Astrid looking upset. "Sorry," I said. "I just thought of the fjords I wanted to visit. It's been in my mind for a while." "Ingrid, you really do want to go to the fjords?" Liv giggled with a teasing face. "I think you and Astrid should go together." "Hey, at least I'm not pining for it," I said back. "Well, you're pretty even with the glasses on," Solvig said, mimicking someone adjusting her glasses as she leaned forwards to me. "Thanks. I heard folks say that I would never get married like this. I felt worried though. It wasn't about my looks. Rather, it's Astrid's insistence that we venture into the barrow." That's the problem. That place was seemingly ancient, imposing, and somehow totally bizarre the way it appears. I have never known of a barrow that was undiscovered for a long time. There's no way this could remain like that for a long time. Surely it would have been recorded in the annals of Norse history, or at least discovered by geographic surveys these days. But I still wonder how the hell this can emerge from the sea without any explanation. It wasn't a shared dream, it wasn't a trick of the eyes, and it wasn't some elaborate, undisclosed film production. It was an actual ancient Norse barrow. Everyone all set? Astrid called. All set. Solveig and Live answered eagerly. They were really excited on the idea of going down into the barrow. I was genuinely concerned, putting aside how monumentally stupid yet bold of Astrid to persuade her friends to do that endeavor. It was getting dark, and from the sky a storm was imminent. The dark clouds hovered over us, slowly rolling to cover the last gleams of sunset. Rays as the warm gold skies faded into the gloom of twilight. Shuddering heavily from the coldness of the air and emerging from the water, I huddled myself together and tried to keep warm. My one-piece swimsuit, though more modest than my friends' bikinis, didn't help. Astrid walked up to the doors of the barrow, which we followed. Its exterior was made out of metal, heavily corroded to an unrecognizable shape, with algae and barnacles encrusting the lumpy, mottled surface. I was only able to recognize some remnants of what the door originally looked like in its prime, which were the intricate, interwoven patterns that were recognizably Norse, present on the rims and certain parts of the door. Astrid slammed her palms on the iron doors, bracing herself as she adjusted her posture in order to push the doors open. Stand back, sisters. I'm going to open the doors. Ugh. You're going to get tetanus or something doing that. Liv squealed in disgust as she slightly winced with her arms raised. Don't worry, Liv. I've been moving things with my bare hands and my own strength ever since I was little, Astrid boasted playfully. She then immediately pushed the doors. I felt worried seeing this, since I didn't want her to get hurt or infected from trying to budge these open. It was a less than astounding sight than I expected. Astrid tried pushing the doors, to which it did not budge an inch. Solveig and Liv clapped, cheering for her to rouse her enthusiasm and passion despite their reluctance. Maybe it was the exciting notion, to an blindingly oblivious extent, of entering an actual Norse tomb that got the better of their own judgment and instincts. I looked up arch of the frame of these doors. Likewise, it was badly eroded and encrusted with a sickly green of algae and sponges, alternating with a stone of barnacles and mussels. One thing that I found legible was an inscription written in Elder Futhark and hence Old Norse language, although it was rendered nigh unreadable with missing or partial obscured runes. I could still manage to deduce the text of the inscription, though with some gaps in it. Then suddenly, the iron doors swung open with an immense crash when Astrid did the final push. The strong blast of musty, briny air from the dark mouth of the cave blew against us. I was briefly stunned, forgetting about my concerns as I gazed into the whistling yawn of the barrows. Hearing that, my nerves frazzled and I felt my body jump like a leaping lizard, frightened by it. Cold sweat started dripping from my body with an overwhelming shudder and a nervous gaze at the barrow's interior. I felt I had no courage to venture deep into whatever's within this place. My friends noticed my frightened, worried expression. Solveig looked at me with a sympathetic gaze. What's wrong? Why are you scared? Nothing. I covered up my current mood. It's just that I feel really nervous going an adventure down here with you. Don't worry, we're with you, Ingrid, Astrid consoled. Swallow those fears, Ingrid. Think of it as an adventure park, like Skyrim. I'm sure you'll have a sky-high of a holiday. Yep, I agreed, though I subtly objected to the whole thing. Astrid pumped her arms up into the air with a big smile and closed eyes as she turned around to face the entrance of the barrow. Let's have an adventure we'll never forget. Entering the depths of the barrow, we were greeted by a stairway within the borders of the passageway. It was small and cramped, barely enough to fit us while we walked in a line with ample room to move. The large worm heads with its distinctly and obvious Norse style that were also present on the floors and the curved walls with arches supporting it, since it was really dark in here, with the last vestiges of light dimming away from the open door. Astrid brought a lot of waterproof, rechargeable flashlights, just in case, which surprised me. She gave each of us a big torchlight and a spare flashlight small in size. In a brief moment of levity, I joked that she was always prepared for in every possible contingency, whether it could happen or not. Still, I was extremely afraid and worried. The deeper we delved into the barrow, the more that hunch grew like some black weed ensnaring me whole around my neck and heart. I felt a choking sensation in my throat, slowly tightening its grip the further down. The air became colder, accompanying the growing dark surroundings as we arrived at the bottom of the stairway passage. Soon, it was pitch black, with the only source of light coming from our torchlights. The chamber below the stairs was simply a straight and spacious corridor. It was curved like the stairs beforehand and felt like we're in a modestly sized service tunnel. The water flooding the floor was knee-deep and made an unpleasant sloshing sound. It was here that the air became extremely foul and bitter in stench. It was the stench of rot and decay by the sea and time, vanished with a detailed Norse ornamentation, replaced by simple megalithic designs with similarly simplified geometry. It was more reminiscent of genuine Visigothic and Ostrogothic styles found in Spain and Italy with a substantial Norse influence. The wormheads were sparse and spaced out with larger gaps between them, but in exchange these were more elaborate, to the point it looked like it was going to pounce, due to the shadows from the limited sources of light. One thing that was different was the bas-reliefs along the wall between the wormheads. So spooky, Selvig said. I can barely see even with this light. You have a very luminous torchlight. I'm sure you can clearly see what's in here, live, replied, fear slightly tinging her voice. No, Selvig replied. I mean it's really dark. My eyesight's poor in such conditions. Hey, Astrid giggled as she stopped and turned around. I think you should spend some time training your eyes to adapt in the dark. Look, I did that exercise in the woods. Wouldn't eating carrots be better alternative? Liv asked. That's a wartime propaganda myth propagated by the Allies, I corrected. It was used as a distraction to cover the fact that the British utilized night vision technology for their air force. Damn it, Liv grunted in defeat. It's fun, I said, but you really think it's a good idea to go down the bottom of this barrow? I feel very cold and I'm really frightened by the surroundings. Are you serious? Astrid replied. Ingrid, we're not turning back after walking all the way down here. It's an adventure of a lifetime. Sisters are you, I replied. Although it's cold, as you say, Selvig said. You're just ruining the mood here. It's ancient and undocumented, I chided. What more do you expect? This thing suddenly rose out of the sea without any explanation. We should turn back and inform the authorities and archaeologists about this barrow. Plus, We're wearing completely inappropriate attire for exploration. You've said that before, Liv said. She brushed her red hair as she looked at Astrid. We're going to make the best of what we can explore. Sisters, Astrid pointed at the bas-reliefs. Is it just me, or are those bas-reliefs look kind of creepy? Take a look. I turned around at the direction she was pointing at and shone a light towards it. Along the walls, I could clearly see more of what it looked like. The sculptures were broken and eroded with missing parts and other parts, and runic inscriptions, worn down to an unreadable form. But nonetheless, I was able to observe and interpret these reliefs. What is it? Liv inquired as she approached over my shoulder. Hey, don't get so close to me. It isn't funny when it's very dark and it's intruding into my personal space. I chided, nearly frightened to death by her sudden, unannounced arrival. I took another glance again at the bas-reliefs. Along the walls, it relayed some sort of narrative despite some gaps due to its age and damage. The thing was, though, it didn't correspond to any established and pre-existing accounts from actual history or myths of the Norse. It felt strange, out of place even if outright mystical and demonic. If there was a word for it, my body suddenly had an urge to quiver greatly once I pieced together the narrative of the bas-reliefs and its accompanying runic inscriptions. I explained it thusly to my friends, who stood there eagerly with morbid curiosity. I was reluctant to explain, but I mustered the courage despite my reservations and fears. A Jarl feared death as he approached old age. Knowing the inevitability of it, he sought the cleverness and skill of a crone. She instructed the Jarl to find a black jewel from the depths. So he brought a band of men and journeyed to an island near to the far north and slain a warrior in black, for which they took his heart before his body vanished, and retrieved the jewel. What happens next? Solveig asked. Well then, it gets bizarre and frightening, but I'll try, I swallowed in fear. The crone drew a ritual circle and instructed the Jarl and his men to enter it. Using the black jewel and the heart, she transformed them into deathless forms. However, this left them insane, and they were imprisoned in a barrow built by his brother. That's very scary, Astrid noted, but this seems nonsensical and piddling. Where's the full story? That's all I can ever reconstruct based on available material, I admonished. We're lucky that a substantial portion of this bas-relief is preserved. There's a lot of gaps between the narrative due to pieces fallen into disrepair since the last time this place was probably open. That seems to be worth being called the mystery of the ages, Liv said. Isn't that right, Solveig? Yeah, as insipid. And dull as it sounds, this barrow sure holds a fascinating tale. Surely there must be a full story behind this, Solveig said. Asterisk, asterisk, can't we just turn back already? I pleaded. It was getting stressful by the minute. I was already shivering from how cold the room was and scared from how dark it was. I think it's a great delve and all, but I think it's time we stop and go home. It's getting late out there, and why we would even do that? Astrid stood her position. We came all this way down after all we went through, Ingrid. There's another room up ahead, and I want to see it. But Astrid, I said, my voice trailing off into the dripping, gloomy ambience. I pointed at the door at the end of the corridor. We don't know what's truly up ahead. I have a bad feeling about it. I sense a dangerous thing up ahead. I pointed at the door at the end of the corridor. I was scared to the core. I couldn't understand what was going on, but I felt there was something within that barrow which disturbs me greatly. When I turned around, Astrid was gone. She had just slid off quietly, leaving only a trail of footsteps, followed by ripples in the water. Her friends also followed suit. Startled, I saw the door at the end of the corridor opened ajar, offering no ambiguity of what was going on. I ran towards the end of the corridor, entering to whatever is beyond that door. Entering the room, I was greeted to a majestic but decrepit room. It was circular in layout and surprisingly spacious for something that was built underground. The stonemason rebuilt, walls and ceiling designed in a plain, unremarkable fashion, with perfectly slotted slabs and bricks coupled with carvings and pillars akin to the Neolithic tombs, with some elements of actual Gothic architecture. A sickly, yet light blue bathed the room. It was the bioluminescence of the phosphorescent algae that grew on the surrounding walls. At the middle of the room was a raised plinth. On it was pedestal. I saw Astrid standing in front of the pedestal, gazing on that pedestal. Liv and Solveig flanked her with them, staying behind to watch. I ran closer to them, my foot splashing on the cold water and ancient, time-worn stone floor of the room. Ingrid, Astrid, called my name. She gestured by waving, her hands forward as she pointed at the pedestal with her other arm. "Look what I found," she clamored. I focused my eyes at the thing she was pointing at. It was a piece of jewelry, shimmering under the faint light of the room and our flashlights. I adjusted my glasses to check whether it was a trick of my eyes, and to get a clearer look at it. I approached the plinth, slowly walking up the terraced steps. It was a golden necklace shaped like a dragon. The ornate and intricate design, bearing the hallmarks of an authentic artifact of the Norse era, was inlaid with an assortment of gemstones, diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, rubies, and amethysts. It was engraved with motifs and runes of the culture it was crafted. Holding together the necklace was a disc-shaped pendant with concentric circles. It was inserted with 4 engraved gemstones, each of a different color and accompanying rune, with one at the center of the pendant, and clockwise at the 12 o'clock position. A red Ansuz, a blue Sowilo, a green Isers, and a yellow Lagut. The center gem was a purple Athala rune. Then I saw a runic inscription at the bottom of the pedestal. Although it was covered in gunk and mold, and the writings faded, I was able to glean the contents of the text. Then suddenly, Astrid ran up the plinth, startled even before I could interpret and translate the text. I stopped her by grabbing her shoulder. "Hold up, Astrid. Hey." "Why you're stopping me, Astrid?" I told her. "There's an inscription at the plinth." I pointed my flashlight at that. The light made the runes clearer for me to read with its blood-red strokes. "Ingrid, that necklace is so pretty," she cooed. "I want to take it. That one is a legitimate historical artifact, not just something you'd buy from the local retailer. It has marks of authentic craftsmanship and age." "What does it say?" Salvik asked, pointing at the inscription. I was a student in Old Norse language and culture. I was familiar with every word listed in the books and the grammar, along with the capacity to read its written form. It was a short inscription, so I quickly memorized the writing and transcribed and translated it. My voice quivered. The drowned ones beneath the dark depths of the sea, waiting for the day he emerges above the tides. Whosoever wears this necklace, if she be worthy, shall be the herald of their host, as the bride of the tides. Solveig and Liv gazed at me with a startled, yet enthralled gaze. It was as though they were deeply both captivated and frightened by what I said. But Astrid, she was really nonplussed and unimpressed. Her face remained in that bright-eyed, adventurous smile which continued to persist despite the darkness and rather foreboding atmosphere of this room. "Drowned ones," she exclaimed. Sounds metal. This isn't a metal music video, I admonished loudly. I don't know whether this inscription is true or not, but I think we shouldn't do it. Astrid, get back to your senses and let's leave as soon as possible. I pleaded with never such intensity and desperation. Actual fear tinged my voice, shaking and quivering rhythmically with the cold and dark. "Huh," Astrid scoffed, snorting loudly and then haughtily laughing. "What does it even mean? A soggy legend won't stop me in any way." She quickly ran up, approaching the pedestal. She plucked off the necklace from it, and then immediately putting it on her neck, fastening the clasp as it locked with a tight and secure click. Contrary to my expectations, nothing happened. How do I look? Doesn't this necklace make me prettier and hotter? Astrid playfully remarked as she posed in all sorts of poses that made her attractive and emphasized her womanly parts. "You go, girl," Solveig said. "That red bikini of yours looks fantastic in the lack of light," Liv said. I laughed awkwardly, though still very uneasy with the air around me and the warning that lingered in my mind. I felt a sudden jolt from my back like lightning struck me. I shuddered again, which I turned around to see the doors closed behind me. The air suddenly became cooler. My breath slightly fogged when I exhaled. Meanwhile, Solveig and Liv were just endlessly complimenting and secretly admiring at Astrid's beautiful and well-toned body as she posed with that necklace around her neck. I thought they were being silly and amicable with her, which was always be for time immemorial. Then suddenly I heard a sound. A loud, deep and raspy moan echoed in the chamber. Astrid froze instinctively at the sound, just as she posed, doing that domineering position. Liv hugged Solveig for comfort as she was frightened, frantically looking around for the source of that awful noise. I stood there without moving an inch. That noise continued to echo and reverberate long after it was bellowed. I exhaled softly and carefully, my body shuddering from the fright. My exhalation was very foggy and my teeth started to chatter. "Solveig, I'm scared," Liv cried out, tightening her grip on Solveig. "It's all right. It's probably just the age of this place." Solveig consoled her, despite it being increasingly apparent that whatever was going on wasn't clearly and straightly natural. I heard a cry. I saw Astrid falling to her knees on the plinth, her legs spread, out on the floor as she struggled to pull out the necklace which had fastened shut and wouldn't come off. I saw glimpses, as she thrashed, of her face desperate and terrified as she tried to pry off that thing. She repeatedly gasped for air, seeing that necklace was tightening, constricting like a snake around her throat and leaving welts that burned on her skin. "Somebody help me." Solveig yelped with a howl of fear and deathly worry. The walls around started to weep with the foul and bitter stench of salt and rotting seaweed as water seeped from the cracks and gaps. The room began quaking heavily, dust and pebbles falling from the ceiling as I lost my balance. My bare feet, submerged knee-deep, felt it from the reverberating ripples. Soon, there were torrential rivulets of seawater while the horrid stench grew stronger and more pungent in Agreerid. A voice screamed on top of her lungs in utter agony and terror, then gasping and gargling. My head whipped in the direction of that scream. I saw Astrid. She had fallen to the floor with that necklace fully strangling her throat as it glowed with an unearthly red. Her face was already blue from the lack of oxygen and blood flow, and expressing a cocktail of emotions that I couldn't fully process, but it was mostly fear and despair. "Astrid," I whimpered, stretching my arm towards her. "I'm coming." I slowly approached her in an attempt to console her. The room was flooding, and it had reached up to my thighs. Frigid seawater was sloshed and splashed against my one-piece swimsuit, feeling the deathly cold and brine on my skin, and having to briefly taste it when it landed on my lips like 1,000 tiny whips, to my terror. I froze upon seeing Astrid close up, for what I saw deeply and relentlessly scarred me for life. Gasping loudly to my terror, I slowly backed away, moving by centimeter by centimeter. More water splashed against my body, climbing up to my waist and imminent towards my chest. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't muster even an iota of the fear I was feeling at the moment, and what I saw of my dear friend. Her eyes, her blue eyes, were still blue like she always had, but it was much brighter, to the point I saw her entire orb glow with eldritch blue color that glowed in the dark. Her eye sockets hollowed and darkened with such a pace that I only saw a bluish glow in those. I was unable to stare into those eyes, yet I came to realize the soulless, deep black, sclera-like obsidian staring into my heart and soul. Her smooth, fair, and unblemished skin slowly shriveled and decayed, her pigmentation turning from a pale white skin into a greyish hue, but I'd say pale blue. Some of her skin sloughed off with a sickly plop into the water, accompanied by a reek of putrefaction. Her jaws were shriveled and wrinkled so thoroughly that I could see her teeth when she tried to speak, but only a horrid groan that slid between the teeth with shrunken gum. "My time has come," she gurgled with a voice that wasn't hers. "I have risen from the depths of the abyss, for my soul has transcended death and beyond hell." The temperature plummeted like a titanic collision. Icicles and frost started condensing on the walls with such a speed that I thought I was in fast motion. Seawater rushed in faster and voluminous, to the point it had promptly reached up to my shoulders. I turned around, away from the horrid sight of what Astrid had become. She wasn't Astrid, but some ancient spirit from a long-dead civilization. I waded through the water, hoping to flee from that awful creature. My heart hammered as my feet touched the cold, slimy floor and even colder water that immersed me. Asterisk, asterisk, live. Solvig, I screamed, trying to warn my other friends. Get out of there. We're going to drown. And I saw them. With my own eyes, I saw them that broke my heart and mortified me. I couldn't see due to the water drowning out the light, but I could. See, I could clearly see something. Something has seized my friends. A myriad of writhing, wiggling tendrils rose from the torrential floodwaters in this chamber like worms after a summer drizzle. They flexed as they writhed, swinging their appendages in unison, in a movement that was both livid and vivid. From where I stood, frozen, I saw my friends' bodies being hoisted upright into the air by their arms and legs. They were soaked and limp, frostbite eating up their bodies. Their attire was tattered, rendered filthy by muck, slime, and seawater. One could not see their faces, but briefly, even in a moment, they were dead frozen with live screaming and Solvi. Despairing, I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I dodged the whipping of the kelp tentacles, crashing into the water like a wrecking ball that deafened my ears. I plowed through the rising water as it rushed up to my chin. I walked up the steps leading to the door and tried to open. I wouldn't budge. I rammed against the door with all my strength, over and over again as I was fully submerged. I thought I was going to die, with the extreme cold piercing my body and the mere thought of drowning and being killed by the tentacles. But those thoughts I channeled to provide my strength. I broke down the door with one final, brutal push. I toppled on the floor as seawater rushed out, I smelled mold and tasted the rancid, acrid seawater from the chamber. I staggered, struggled to stand up and run after nearly drowning and knocked over in the process. My feet struggled to maintain a foothold while my body tried to maintain its balance on the slippery, cold stone floor. I heard a hoarse, deep growl from behind. It spoke in an archaic, unrecognizable language. It was soon clear it was catching up and approaching me. I didn't even dare think about what happened to Solveig and Liv, only that they hopefully died before things got worse. I shuddered, not bothering to even mentally transcribe and translate the words that were said. As I stood up and ran, I slipped again. The stumble down the damp, flooded floor, my glasses falling out of my eyes. I shrieked as I scrambled to grab it. Everything was a blur and pitch black in even colder air and water. I heard a loud shatter as it plopped into the water, followed by a big rush. Regardless, my heart pounded as adrenaline rushed in my body. I ran directly towards the way we entered here. My legs strained and burned as I stood up, paradoxically against the coldness and darkness of the surroundings. I ran and ran as fast as I could, like lightning. I dared not to turn back as I felt the foreboding, fearsome presence come closer behind me. I ran up the steps. My feet struggled to maintain its grip on the worn, slippery stone, which I staggered, and stumbled in a frantic, furious rush to escape this vile place. A breeze of cold, yet fresh sea air blew against me, which was somehow kinder and comforting than the air of the depths of the barrow. A blurry glimpse of moonlight and the stars, like painted dreams in a Nordic summer night, feeling the fury and fear deep within me. I screamed loudly and fiercely as I climbed up the stairs and lunged out of the moors of the barrow. Though it was blurry, I saw a faint glimpse of the shore in front of me. I stepped on the stone patio and immediately darted into the water. A great raw and thunderous sound echoed through the hollows of the barrow and out of the moors. A shockwave hurled me into the sea like thunder. I was immediately stunned, unable to coherently think as I struggled to adjust my position underwater, struggling to find some air in the depths. I saw the glimmer of moonlight above the water. I swam up as an indicator of my orientation. My arms and legs ached as I swam up with what remains of my energy as my lungs started screaming for air, surfacing up the water with a loud, pained gasp. Immediately, I swam towards the faraway shoreline in the frame of my sight. I closed my eyes and just swam and swam and swam and swam and swam. My mind was deeply terrified and numb. I was hypervigilant with all my senses flared up with vivid detail, knowing all the sensations that enveloped my body. Blankly, I swam and swam and swam and swam and swam with my eyes closed. The voice was still there. Not Astrid's, but the spirit who used her body as a medium, echoing across the vast, uncaring sea, dwarfing the rolling waves, the stormy squall, and the pounding of raindrops. I felt something soft touching my soles. I kicked, swimming harder, trying to flee from what dwells in that barrow. Splashing and sloshing, I felt the small, faint breeze against my face. The water was shallower and less fierce. I opened my eyes and saw a reflection of myself, a lithe young woman with a brown bob cut and tanned skin, devoid of her glasses that made her nerdy, despite how much of a blur my vision was. In an instant, I stepped on a patch of soft sand. I quickly stumbled and staggered as I emerged from the water. I was exhausted, my limbs sore and wet and cold from swimming away from the water. I opened my eyes, falling face forward on a rocky outcropping. I adjusted the straps of my one-piece swimsuit now filthy and frayed from fleeing from the barrow. "Sire," I screamed, repeating this chant over and over in desperation. I was an atheist, not believing in gods, but I prayed for the salvation of the souls of my friends Astrid, Solveig, and Liv. I prayed their souls would enter heaven instead of being beneath the dark and insidious depths of the barrow. And then suddenly I heard her voice. "Ingrid," fearfully, I turned around. My head quivered and shuddered, trying to twitch backwards out of instinct, away from what was calling my name. My blood ran cold as though it was immediately frozen. I lifted my arms, my fingers posed like claws. When I fully turned my head, after struggling for a few moments trying to forcefully overcome my instinctual urge and fear, I screamed. It was Astrid. She was ethereal, like moonlight, the background seen through her translucent body, and phosphorescent and shimmering with silver hue. She was floating above water, her feet a few inches above the sea. Her hair floated and whipped as if she was submerged underwater. She wasn't like the foul Drogo. She transformed and looked almost normal. Almost normal. Her skin was pale as snow, and her hair was platinum blonde, like our other friend Katya. Just behind her in the background was that accursed mephitic barrow. The black spires surrounding its water-odoured dark mound slowly submerged into the sea, with a great, sickening growl and gargle accompanied with sloshing and rumbling. It was as if this structure had served its purpose and now returning to the dark, dead depths of the sea, never to be seen again under the moonlight of the beach. "You're not her," I screamed at the phantom, taking the likeness of Astrid's, almost immediately, without a second thought or any moment of hesitation. I sprinted with my hairs stood up. I dashed blindly into the woods that were just up ahead of me. I was scared, really terrified. All my friends are dead, and whatever was freed from that barrow now wanted to pursue me. I just ran, hoping the voices would dissipate into the dead. Of night, I dared not look back, for I knew that spirit, or demon, or whatever supernatural being that came from the barrow was pursuing me, telling me to return and embrace. My feet scraped, crunched, and pierced with the leaf litter, twigs, pebbles, and other things lying on the forest floor and underbrush. Branches and shrubs of the thicket and the trees birched against my face and body, leaving cuts and bad gashes on my skin. But it didn't matter. It was painful, and I was cold and wet. But I kept moving on because the alternative was dying by the hands of the thing. I saw the lights ahead. It was Astrid's hometown. I screamed loudly as I entered the limits of the town. I saw the closest house in my distance, lit by the inside, and dashed blindly towards it, hoping to find shelter and refuge from the thing. Days later, a missing persons report was filed. In and out of Count Hospital where I was recovering, I was brought for questioning by the police. I lied, not because I wanted to deceive or cover up some horrible crime, but I knew the truth, and it was too horrible for me to speak, too fantastic, to even explain, lead. I maintained that me and my friends were swimming, and we were caught in some rough surf and hidden current, and they drowned like the spirit within the depths. Barrow by them, and the voices of the dead speak Astrid, Solveig, and Liv. I'm sorry. I pray you are in a better place than the cold, dark tomb. I cannot escape agony. They are still out there in the above, already freed from their prison for centuries. Every time I sleep, close my eyes, shut off the dark in silence, I hear whispers, chanting in Old Norse, deep, hoarse, and raspy, declaring the return of the drowned ones. invoking the sacred name of Nerthus and Loki amidst a plethora of obscene, forgotten names of yore. They beckon me to come and join in their ranks, in the depths of the North Sea where they reside, and one day they will rise. This barrow will rise from the dark, dead depths of the sea, looking for more souls to be sacrificed in its maw and depths. And they will grow powerful with each passing day, each soul sacrificed. For a year and a day I have left. Story 1 ends here, now. Let's begin story 2. Whatever visits at 1:10 a.m. doesn't like when you're sitting. Have you ever wondered if a job could kill you? Not with danger, but with secrets so strange they gnaw at your sanity. Or let me ask you this, what would you do if a silent red watch on your wrist started ordering you to stand, or else? Would you obey, not knowing what waits if you don't? That's the kind of nightmare I stumbled into when I took the most ordinary sounding job on paper. Toll collector on a lonely stretch of Highway 371, buried deep in the humid underbelly of that city. It was a job as plain as day. Sit in a booth, swipe cards, take cash, lift the gate, scribble license plates in a battered notepad. No health insurance, no sick leave, no overtime, just a bare bones paycheck hovering a whisper above minimum wage. Yet, beneath that thin surface, something festered, something no one warned me about. Desperation drove me to it. My car had coughed its last breath. Rent was overdue, and my landlord's patience was running on fumes. A cousin I barely kept in touch with handed me this lifeline. They're hiring, no questions asked, no paperwork, just show up. You can start tonight. So I did. And when the man in charge passed me the cold, rusty keys, he muttered something that should have sent me running. Don't worry about the weird stuff. Just follow the alerts. I laughed it off, assuming he meant storm warnings or amber alerts, crackling through a dusty radio, but I couldn't have been more wrong. That first night swallowed me whole in its quiet. I arrived at the booth at 10:45 p.m., the thick air sticky on my skin. The booth itself was a cramped, rotting box, no bigger than a closet. Inside, a metal chair with cracked vinyl, a desk scarred with cigarette burns, a stubborn cash drawer, a yellowed notepad clinging to its last pages, a wheezing fan that did little to fight the heat, and one item that made my gut twist the moment I saw it. A watch, not the kind you'd buy at Walmart or find in your granddad's drawer. This was strange, a black band tight around my wrist, its screen pulsing a dim red glow. No clock face, no numbers, no buttons, no apps, just that blood-colored screen waiting as if it was alive. I told myself it must be some outdated tracker for my hours, maybe my heartbeat. Hours oozed by like molasses. A trickle of cars rolled through. I collected tolls, logged plates, battled mosquitoes the size of quarters. My eyelids grew heavy. Then at exactly 1:13 a.m., the watch came to life. One word, stand. My throat constricted as I forced myself to clear it. I blinked at the watch, puzzled, heart thumping like a drum. Before I could think, a voice, not from the booth, not from my phone, echoed deep in my skull. Like a broadcast beamed straight into my mind. Emergency notice. Rule 4. Between 1:10 and 1:20 a.m., do not remain seated. Every hair on my arm stood at attention. Without hesitation, I shoved the chair back, its legs shrieking across the floor, and stood. That's when I saw it, outside the booths. Grimy window, a shape crept past. A black slithering mass that clung to the ground like a shadow came alive. No feet, no face, no sound, just endless black stretching across the asphalt. I didn't breathe, I didn't move. The thing didn't look at me, if it even had eyes. Time dragged its feet, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the watch's glow blinked out at 1:20. The thing was gone. That was the first rule I learned. The first night that taught me this job wasn't about tolls. It was about surviving whatever shared that highway with me. So tell me, if you were in that booth, would you follow the watch? Would you obey even if you didn't understand? Or would curiosity get the better of you? Stick around, because what came next? It wasn't just rules, it was warnings. And breaking them had a price by the end of that first hellish week. I had 7 rules scrawled in shaky handwriting across the stained pages of my notepad, a personal Bible of survival, stitched together not by logic, but by fear. None of these rules came from a training manual. No supervisor handed them to me with a wink and a good luck. No, they came to me in the dead of night, whispered by that voice that invaded my mind, delivered through that cursed red watch, like some cryptic survival guide written for a world that shouldn't exist. And as I learned quickly, violating these rules wasn't just careless, it was suicidal. Here's what I lived by. Rule 1. If the same car passes through twice within 10 minutes, no matter the driver, no matter how innocent they look, you charge double. Rule 2. If a child is behind the wheel, you wave them through. Don't take their money. Don't ask questions. Rule 3. If you hear knocking beneath the floorboards, play the booth's radio immediately. Rule 4. Between 1:10 and 1:20 a.m., do not stay seated. Stand up and don't sit until it's over. Rule 5. Never look at anyone who speaks backward. Keep your eyes down. Rule 6. If an old woman pays with exact change, look into her eyes. Make sure they're human. Rule 7. If the watch flashes the word hide, crawl under the desk and do not, under any circumstances, breathe loud enough to be heard. At first glance, some of these rules seemed almost laughable. A child driving, charge double for the same car. But trust me, they weren't jokes. I didn't invent them. I didn't dream them up during a long, lonely shift. These were commands, delivered in that hollow voice that echoed through my skull like the tolling of a funeral bell. And behind every rule there was a consequence, waiting, sharp-toothed and unforgiving for those foolish enough to ignore. It and I, like a fool, learned that lesson the hard way. It was on my 12th shift, a night that began like all the others, thick with the scent of swamp rot and the unshakable feeling of being watched. The air hung heavy, and the booth felt smaller somehow, like the walls were inching closer, trying to squeeze the life out of me. Around 3 a.m., when the world felt more dead than asleep, I heard it. At first, it was a faint tap-tap-tap beneath the floorboards, like someone drumming their fingers, impatient, waiting for me to slip up. I froze, my ears straining in the dark. The tapping grew bolder, louder, a steady knocking that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Rule 3. I knew what it demanded. Turn on the radio, drown out the sound, but I hesitated. The watch stayed dark. No word, no alert. And in my arrogance, or perhaps exhaustion, I convinced myself the rule wasn't active tonight. Maybe it was just the building settling, or rats beneath the floor. I reasoned it away because the truth was too frightening to face. That's when the knocking stopped. For the briefest breath of a second, all was silent. and then crack. The floor split. The wood splintered like kindling. From that jagged opening, a hand emerged. A hand that wasn't right. Its skin was a sickly grey, stretched tight over bones that jutted at the wrong angles. Fingers, 6 of them, too long, too thin, tipped with nails like slivers of glass. It moved with eerie grace, wrapping round the leg of my chair as if it had all the time in the world. My blood turned to ice. My throat tightened so violently I thought I'd choke. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Not at first. Then, instinct took over. My shaking fingers smacked the radio dial, and the booth erupted in a wave of static and white noise. The hand twitched. Its fingers flexed, as if testing the air. And then, like smoke caught in a breeze, it slipped back beneath the floorboards, vanishing into the dark crack that slowly sealed itself shut. I didn't sleep the next day. I couldn't, because now I knew these weren't empty rules. They were shields. And breaking them had woken something that still wasn't done with me. Even now, on some nights, that knocking comes back. Faint at first, like a memory I can't bury. A reminder that it's waiting. And believe me, every single time. I play the radio. Asterisk, asterisk. So what would you do if you sat in that booth? With nothing but a flickering radio and a set of rules that felt more like warnings than guidance. Would you follow them? Or would curiosity or pride cost you everything? Stay tuned, because what I've shared, that was only the beginning, and the worse the rule, I couldn't bring myself to obey, nearly cost me my life. It was a night like all the others, or so I told myself. But deep down, I sensed it, that heavy, suffocating stillness that wraps around you right before something breaks. And when it broke, it changed everything. I had grown used to the rhythm of terror, the familiar pulse of that watch lighting up with commands, the quiet dread of waiting for what came next. But this night rewrote the rules, quite literally. Sometime past 2 a.m., when the fog rolled in, thick as graveyard mist, and the highway lay deserted, I felt it. The sudden, unnatural drop in temperature, the way the air seemed to thicken, as if the darkness itself had weight. That's when I noticed the car. No headlights, no engine hum. I never heard it arrive. It was simply there, idling at the gate, like it had materialized from thin air. Its paint was the color of rusted iron, the body warped in places, as if it had seen things no car should survive. Then the watch blinked red, its glow casting eerie shadows on the booth walls. EYES. A single word, but before my heart could even quicken, that voice, the one that felt like it scraped across my bones, filled my head. Emergency notice. Rule 6. If an old woman pays with exact change, check her eyes. And there she was. Dot without sound, without warning. She stood at my window. Her skin looked like crumpled parchment, so thin it seemed the wind might tear it. Her hand, trembling but purposeful, reached out with a wrinkled dollar bill and a small, shaking handful of coins. $1.25, she whispered, her voice like dead leaves brushing across pavement. And then she smiled, a slow, hollow curve of the lips that didn't touch her hollow expression. I forced myself to look up. My throat tightened, so violently I thought I might gag, where her eyes should have been. ... Nothing, not blindness, not damaged or scarred. Just 2 dark pits, empty as an open grave, as if something had scooped her soul out through those voids. Panic clawed at me. My instincts shrieked at me to look away, to close the window, to flee. My fingers fumbled for the button, eager to lift the gate, to be rid of her, to end this nightmare. Keep the change, I stammered, voice cracking as I reached for the switch, but she didn't move. She didn't drive through. Instead, she remained there, frozen, smile still carved into that lifeless face. And then she spoke again, her voice sharper this time, the sound burrowing under my skin like ice water pouring down my spine. You're not checking close enough. My skin crawled. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. I spun and slapped the radio on, hoping the static would break whatever spell this was. But the radio gave me nothing, only silence, as if the booth itself held its breath. And when I turned back, she was gone. The car, the woman, the coins she had held. Every trace of them vanished like smoke. The only evidence she had ever been there was the cold dread that clung to me like a second skin. Then, as if the booth had decided to twist the knife, I heard it. The flip of paper. I turned slowly, every nerve on edge. My notepad, my tattered lifeline of rules, lay open on the desk. The page glistened, as if ink had just been spilled across it, fresh and black, bleeding into the paper like it had a mind of its own. And there it was, a new rule, one I had never written, one that hadn't come from the voice, at least not yet. Rule 8, never let her speak twice. I was trembling, not from the cold, from knowing, from the sick certainty that she wasn't finished. What would I do if she came back? Because deep down, I knew this much. She will, not tonight. Maybe not. Tomorrow, but one night, she'll return. And next time, she won't knock. She won't smile. And she sure as hell won't wait. So if you thought that was strange, you haven't heard the worst of it. Because the deeper the night went, the darker the rules got. And trust me, they only got harder to follow. It started like any other night. But by now, I knew better than to trust the quiet. The quiet was a liar. It wrapped itself around the booth like a shroud, hiding what waited beneath. And that night, it hid something I still can't explain. It was well past 2 a.m. when the red glow of the watch broke through the darkness, casting its sinister light across my hand. Double. The word pulsed as if alive, and I knew exactly what it meant. Rule 1. Same car twice within 10 minutes. You charge double. Simple, right. But nothing out here was ever simple. At 2:04, I'd seen it. A silver SUV, its body dusty, a small dent carved into the rear bumper like a scar, and a cheap pine tree air freshener swinging from the mirror. I barely gave it a thought as it rolled through, but at 2:09, there it was again. Same vehicle, same dent, same swaying air freshener. I felt my stomach twist as I stepped to the window. That's gonna be 250, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You came through already. The driver, a man maybe in his 30s, pale as moonlight, sweat dripping from his hairline, didn't argue. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his wallet. He handed me the cash like someone surrendering, like he knew the rules too, somehow. But just as I reached for the gate button, thinking this would be the end of it, he leaned forward. His eyes locked on mine, wide and glassy, the eyes of a man who'd seen something that broke him. I never turned around, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just kept driving straight, never saw a turn-off, never hit a loop. But I'm back here. I froze. My mouth went dry. My mind raced for something, anything, to say. But the words died in my throat. He swallowed hard, desperation bleeding into his voice. Do I keep going? Or will I come back again? And then the watch blinked, Don't. Just like that. One word. A command. The gate stayed shut beneath my fingers. I didn't argue. I didn't dare. The man's face crumpled. Fear, confusion, hopelessness. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to curse. But before any sound came out, headlights bloomed in the rearview mirror. Another vehicle, another silver SUV, identical in every detail. The dent, the dirt, the dangling air freshener swaying in the still night air. But this one had no driver. The empty SUV rolled forward, silent, steady, as if guided by unseen hands, or maybe something worse. The man in front of me saw it too. His eyes darted to the mirror, his breath quick and shallow. What the hell is happening? He choked out, voice cracking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know. The two vehicles sat there, one with a terrified man, trapped behind the wheel, the other hollow and soulless, like a reflection that had stepped out of the glass to take his place. And I could do nothing but watch Dot by the third week. I stopped trying to make sense of any of it. I gave up looking for patterns, for logic, for any thread that might tie this nightmare together. The highway didn't play by human rules, and I'd learned the hard way that trying to outthink it only made it hungrier. So I obeyed every alert, every rule, no matter how strange, no matter how terrifying. I followed them like gospel. But even blind obedience wasn't always enough. One night, the air thicker than usual, heavy with a storm that never came, the watch went mad. Asterisk, asterisk, the red glow didn't just blink. It flashed, frantic and blinding, casting the booth in hellish light. Danger, danger, danger. Over and over, pulsing faster than my heartbeat. No rule, no instruction, just that single word hammering into my brain. And then the broadcast, emergency. Override, hide now, don't ask questions. That voice, cold, mechanical, empty, didn't leave room for hesitation. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I dropped to the floor and crawled under the desk, the splinters biting into my palms. I didn't kill the lights. I didn't even look at the gate. There wasn't time, and then I heard it. A scraping. Sound low, deep, like metal being dragged across asphalt, but not in jerks or bursts. This was smooth, relentless. Something enormous was moving past the booth, slow and steady, like it knew exactly where I was. Bigger than a semi, bigger than anything I'd ever seen on that stretch of road. And yet, ... it cast no shadow. It made no noise except that endless, skin-crawling scrape. And then it spoke, a voice like rust, like wind through a graveyard, like metal tearing itself apart. Rule breaker, ... where ... The words stretched, cracked, echoed through the night. My throat clenched so tight it hurt. My lungs screamed for air, but I didn't dare breathe. It dragged itself along, slow, sniffing, or maybe listening, searching, took the coin, kept the stare, ... No radio, ... The words slithered under the booth's door like smoke, wrapping around me, choking me. It was naming the rules, the ones that had been broken, by me or by someone before. And then the booth lights flickered, once, twice, then died. The watch's glow blinked out. Dead silence, dead dark. I knew in that instant it was right. Outside, close enough to touch, close enough to end me if I made a sound. So I didn't breathe, not a gasp. Not a whimper. I lay there, every muscle locked, while time twisted itself into something unrecognizable. Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt like hours. The thing waited, and so did I. And then, as if satisfied, or maybe bored, it moved on. The scraping faded, swallowed by the night. The lights snapped back. The booth hummed with power again, and the road empty, like nothing had ever been there. But the notepad told a different story. Its pages rustled on their own, as if the wind turned them. But the booth was sealed tight, and there, scrawled in jagged, angry writing that looked burned into the paper. Rule 9. You only get one warning. I don't know who writes the rules. I don't know what writes them. I don't know why this stretch of highway is cursed. Why? This patch of blacktop demands so much from anyone foolish enough to man this booth. And somewhere along the way, I stopped asking, because some questions only invite answers. You can't survive. There are nights when the cars that roll through carry faces I know, faces I loved, faces I buried. A cousin who died 5 years ago, smiling behind the wheel like we're meeting for coffee. My mother, long gone, waving like nothing's wrong. Old friends, former neighbors, all dead, all acting like they're just out for a midnight drive. And I say nothing. I stare at the tolls, at the coins, at anything but them. Because speaking, acknowledging, might open a door I can't close. And then there are nights when the watch stays dark. No alerts, no rules, no guidance. And those nights, those are the worst of all. Because silence on this road doesn't mean safety. Silence means it's watching, waiting, measuring my resolve, testing whether I'll crack. I tell myself I can't do this forever, that one day I'll walk out of the booth, leave the keys on the desk, and drive until I'm free. And I almost did once. It was just before dawn. I'd had enough. My bag was packed. My hand was on the door. I told myself, this is it. I'm done. Let someone else play this game. That's when the watch turned red, stay dot. The word bled through the dark like an open wound. And then the voice followed. That voice that sounds like wind howling through a graveyard. Final rule, if you leave, it follows. And that was it. No explanation, no second chance. Just a final, quiet threat that wrapped icy fingers around my spine. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know, so I'm still here, watching, listening, obeying, writing new rules each time that cursed watch lights up, adding them to this frayed, stained notebook that has become my last line of defense. And if you're hearing this, if you ever find this notebook left behind in an empty booth, pages filled with these rules that don't make sense but feel heavy with purpose, for God's sake, don't ignore it, because the booth may stand empty, the chair may sit cold, but the rules still stand. And the watch will find someone new. So tell me, when it does, would you be ready? Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into story 3. The abandoned garden had 3 rules, and my friends didn't listen. We used to explore graveyards. Other days, it was abandoned buildings. Why? Because my friends wanted to. Don't get me wrong, I don't even like horror. But sometimes, the aesthetics pull you in. Gothic, gore, weirdcore, paranormal, psychological dread, they're disturbing. But in an intriguing way, we'd wander, then leave. Oddly enough, the guards never stopped us. They'd just ignore the fact that a bunch of teenagers were loitering in off-limit zones, Until one day, there were no guards. Just an overgrown path leading to an old, rotting garden wall, spray painted across it in black ink. The abandoned ones. Number. Context. Just 3 rusted warning signs below it, each painted with a red cross. 1. A stick figure running from a tree. The tree's branches were heavy with round, smiling fruits. 2. The same figure, now looking up at them. The fruits were smiling, wider. 3. A taller man, too tall, standing before. Smaller figures walking toward him. The signs didn't make sense. They weren't official, just ... painted ... Jonathan, and I stayed outside. The other 3 went in. We waited for them, got bored. Then we left after texting in the group chat. That night, I got a text from Jordan. You abandoned us. Fuck you. I just stared at the screen. My chest felt heavy. Jordan never talks like that. He was quiet, goofy sometimes, but never angry. I fell asleep with that message in my chest, like a bitter knot I couldn't untangle. The next day at school, Jonathan leaned over my desk. They didn't come home last night. They stayed in the garden. I blinked. How ... do you know? He sighed. Daniel's parents called me last night. Daniel did not return home. Daniel said we abandoned them. They will not return. I stiffened. You too, he frowned. Wait ... You got a call, not a call, I said. A message from Jordan. Jonathan crossed his arms. They've never been angry about splitting up before, so ... you think something's wrong? I asked, feeling uneasy. He nodded. Let's go after class. Since they say we are responsible, we should do something. I hesitated. Those signs were stuck in my head. But those signs, Alex, he cut in. We've broken more rules than we can count. What's one more? I didn't answer, just sighed and nodded. After school, we returned. To the garden. We'd texted them. They replied immediately. Still in the garden. Won't leave. The sun was starting to set. The sky streaked orange and violet. We entered after I also forced Jonathan to memorize the 3 signs. The garden was quiet. Rows of trees, flower bushes, vines curled around broken benches. No animals or birds. Maybe it was too close to nightfall. Leaves crunched under our feet. We stepped deeper in. Then a voice called out, Alexander. Jonathan, you came. We froze. We knew that voice, Theo, but we couldn't see him at first. Turning left and right before the voice called again. Look here, he called again. We thought you'd never come. Just as Jonathan turned his head up to see, I grabbed his wrist. He looked at me, confused. ... What? The voice, I whispered. It's coming from the tree. His face went pale. ... The tree. I nodded. The tree. The voice called again. Alexander. Jonathan, should we leave the garden? I whispered. Jonathan hesitated. Without them, we return with adults later. He seemed to consider it before agreeing. We ignored the calling and walked away. Are we doing the right thing? I whispered. I think so. Just keep watching the ground above us, shuffling, movement. A soft voice called, Boys, can you help me? Please look up, ... We need your help. We didn't look, but we knew, we felt it. Dozens of heads, hanging from branches like fruit. We could feel them smiling. Come on, guys, look here. Jonathan grabbed my hand, about to run. I stopped him. Jonathan, second sign, said not to run. He nodded. We're not running. he said. We'll walk. Act normal, John. I whispered. My stomach dropped at the thought. Do you think? There, he shook his head too fast. No, no way. That's not them. Those aren't our friends. He pulled out his phone in a hurry. I'll call them. I'll prove it. He dialed Daniel's number while we walked forward. We were almost at the entrance when we saw him. A tall, too tall man, standing just past the gate, and he picked up the call. Double quotes, ... What the foo, Jonathan muttered, his grip tightening on my wrist. My heart slammed in my chest. The third sign, the tall man, the smaller figures. Approaching the man raised the phone to his ear. Hello, Jonathan, he said, in Daniel's voice. I yanked Jonathan back. End the call, I hissed. Now. We turned away from the entrance and walked deeper into the garden. Voices erupted around us. Shouts, laughter, cries, echoes. None of them were clear, but they all wanted one thing, for us to look up. Alex, John. We flinched at the voice of Jordan. We said nothing, just walked faster. Anywhere but here, deeper into the woods. Suddenly, Jonathan tugged me behind a tree. John, we crouched, holding our breath. The tall man again, roaming nearby, shovel in hand. What, ... Wasn't he at the entrance? I whispered. Jonathan opened his mouth before he could start. A head hit the ground, rolled across the dirt, eyes wide, still smiling. Hey, look here, please help me, it said. I almost screamed when I took a glimpse. Jonathan grabbed my arm tight, and we saw the man approaching the head. No, ... N-O-O-O ... double quotes. He'd see us. Who knows what would happen? My breath faltered. Tears welled in my eyes. But Jonathan pulled me again, around the tree. Out of that man's sight, I looked at him, only to see his eyes also filled with fear, his shaking hands. But still he was focused, trying to save us both. We kept moving behind, hiding behind one tree to another. Double quotes John ... Do we head for the wall or the gate? I asked, looking up at him. Since this place is surrounded by walls, there must be a place to climb. He thought for a moment. Back. Keep going back. That man is heading towards the entrance. We nodded, stuck together at last. After what felt like hours of walking, we reached the wall. I almost cried. Jonathan helped me up first, just as I stood. I looked back. The man was running toward us, and the trees, oh God, so many heads, watching, smiling, screaming. They are abandoning us. They saw us and won't save us. They should be buried here too. The man sprinted with an uneven gait, shovel raised dangerously. I pulled Jonathan up. He was heavy, but I wouldn't let go. The shovel hit the wall beneath his feet. He grabbed me. I hugged him and leaned back, so we both fell. But I hit my head, and it hurt like hell. Alex. Jonathan caught me, holding me up. Screams roared behind us. Somehow, ... we made it out. Running through more trees in the dark, we stumbled to the road. Gasping for air after running as much as we could, I looked at Jonathan, sitting on the ground, and panting. Thanks, Alex. Jonathan whispered. I looked at him. ... No, thanks to you. I sat beside him. For you, I was able to live. If it weren't for you, ... I would've. Looked ... He shook his head. I can't lose another friend. He stared down at his fingers. We ... couldn't save them. We should have ... gone with them ... He covered his eyes after that. Yes, maybe if we had gone along, they might have followed the warnings. Maybe the three of them wouldn't have had to face any of it. ... I sat beside him. I did not realize when my eyes got wet. Since then, we've never gone back to abandoned or haunted places. After a lot of investigation, police had found many headless bodies around the garden. No heads found the killer. To this day, wasn't found. The garden still thrives. Even when it was destroyed, that place was not freed from its curse. This is the garden of abandoned ones, where people used to be killed once they were abandoned by their people. It has a big history, which I, nor Jonathan, wanted to dig into, since then we grew closer to each other. Only we shared the fear of looking up at trees with hesitation. Story 3 ends here, now. Listen closely to story 4. My grandma told me stories to warn me. The stories aren't working anymore. I need to recollect my thoughts. None of this will make sense otherwise, but I need to explain what's been happening. A few days ago, I temporarily moved back to my hometown. For my grandmother, she still lived where I grew up, in the Pacific Northwest. A small, easily passable town. Not somewhere deep in the middle of nowhere, but far enough from major cities that most people had no idea where you were talking about, and most people from there would just say that you grew up in the sticks. The town may as well have been a time capsule, if it weren't for the occasional car from this century and the one or two families that could afford a newer TV. It looked like nothing about the town had been improved or repaired since at least the 1950s. The school got its last coat of fresh paint maybe 20 years before I was born. The general store has the same hand-carved wooden sign that the owner's father had put up when it opened, and a few of the trees dotting the town have birdhouses in their branches that hadn't seen a resident since the Vietnam War, at least. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little eerie at times. It wasn't a bad place to grow up by any means, and the people here are nice enough. But the notable thing about the residents is that they're all very superstitious. This town is old, so stories you heard around the campfire about a monster in the woods had been told from generation to generation. At least a quarter of the stories involved one of the supposedly haunted houses in town, and the rest were run. Of the mill monster in the woods, someone's grandpa swore they saw. A few generations of that is enough for anywhere to develop local legends and superstitions surrounding them, especially in my family. Grandma Joanne told me most of the legends surrounding the town that I still remember. When I was a kid, she'd tell me before bed when babysitting me. She always looked happy to tell them. Your mama used to love these stories when she was your age. Truth be told, they scared me something fierce when your great-grandma told me hers. She'd say she was better at storytelling than me, and these stories helped keep me and your mama safe. Every bedtime story was a little creepy too, completely terrifying. Hell, sometimes she'd even turn it into a song. Looking back, each one was more of instructions or a warning rather than a regular, the scary monster was spooky, the end. One story was about what she called the hollow face that would watch her through the window, and her grandma would tell her to sleep with a sprig of rosemary on her person because, as grandma used to say, keep away bad spirit. I've tried asking her a few times about the hollow face, and the garlic great-grandma called it that since I was little. Honestly, I think she just thought the name was snappy. The rosemary though, she said it kept her safe when she came to. America, old family tradition, I never forgot these stories. But a lot of the details got lost on me over time, but moving home did make them start to come back. My parents called me about a week prior to moving out here, saying grandma needed some more help around the house. Her age was starting to catch up with her. My dad said they'd have a full-time caregiver move in with her soon, but until then, she needed that extra help. I didn't mind, of course. I was in between jobs at the moment, and my hometown always had odd jobs to do. Plus, getting to spend time with her again seemed nice. I got a call from my dad on the way up. Mom had driven her into the city that morning to visit a friend who was in the hospital. So I figured I'd surprise her when she got home the next day. Driving through town was very surreal, the main road giving way to pothole-filled dirt roads. The old stop signs with rust on the edges gave a strangely comforting sense of nostalgia, and the small diner's sun-bleached plastic chairs were upside down on the wooden tables out front. Grandma's house was in the middle of town, not too far from the old beat-up park I spent most summers playing in. The outside had a few plants growing over and under the fence, and the grass had not been mowed in a while, but it still had her distinct charm to it. Inside, she had had photos on the wall of me throughout my childhood amongst the piles of old art projects she'd tried and given up on over the years. Old handmade frames made from driftwood covered the walls, but one stuck out. Next to the wood stove was a photo of me and my best friend when we were around 14. His real name I'll leave out for privacy, but we'll call him Todd. Todd and I drifted apart after high school. I think he joined the military or something right after graduation. I wish we would have stayed in contact more. I thought about calling him or walking to his old house in hopes he, or at least his parents, would be home to kill time. Looking at the photo reminded me of that summer. That photo I found was taken the day we first started an end of summer tradition, or kind of ritual, if you can call it that. We'd sneak off in the warm evenings near the end of July before elk season 2, one of the small orchards on the outskirts of town. There was this herd of elk that would come to graze every year, a pretty big one too. We never counted, but I'd guess over 100 at least. The game was, we would try to coax one of the elk to come closer as they were circling, getting ready to fall asleep. If one of us were able to pet one without it getting scared off or getting into a defensive stance, we believed it would be good luck for a year. Looking back, it was so dumb and dangerous. The elk were twice our size, and we did it as they were relaxing. But we were kids who wanted to prove who was braver than the other. Also, like I said, we were raised superstitious. The idea of having good luck for an entire year was hard to pass up. My family wouldn't be home for another day, so I decided to head out after unloading my bags and a few boxes into the guest room. I hadn't done this, or even just watched an entire herd since I moved away, and the last time we did it. My best friend had gotten so close to petting one, but got spooked at the last second. A little good luck wouldn't hurt right now. I thought to myself, maybe even some of it would transfer over to Grandma. Asterisk, asterisk, it took a few minutes to remember what I used to take with me and about an hour to actually find all of it. Grandma had her own system for storing things, and to this day none of us understand it. I made my checklist and crossed everything off. A full meal's worth of food, 2 bottles of water, one of Grandpa's hunting knives. He had a collection for years. Even when I was a kid, he didn't mind if I took one. 2 flashlights, a water skin that was probably older than the house. One of the apples from the tree in the backyard to try and bribe one of the elk with Anne, a pinch of rosemary, fresh sage, and the ash we collected, all put into their own bags. The herbs and ash I was always told to keep on my person. I had a small bag of each of them in my backpack growing up, but it's been years since I've seen that bag. With all of that, I began walking through the town. I got some waves and hugs from people I hadn't seen since I moved as they were preparing for the evening, as well as being hit with familiar smells. The smell of cedar and the red valerians. A few neighbors grew out front, though the strongest was the smell of lavender. Most of the town had at least one bush of it out front. Always an ever-present smell, even now. Asterisk, asterisk, it was starting to get towards sunset, so I figured if Todd was home, he'd be getting ready for bed. Visiting him in the morning was probably more polite, but I might still have a chance to try and get some luck. I started to walk a bit faster towards the orchards, forgetting how quiet small towns get after living in a city for a few years. Each crunch of the gravel underneath my feet hit me all at once with how loud it was. Thankfully, the gravel quickly began to give way to the thick grass as I got to the edge of town. I could see the large brown wall of elk in the distance and began slowing my walk so I didn't scare them off easily. As I got closer, the sun had turned the sky a soft orange and pink. In this light, how majestic, but also just how large elk are, came back to me. Most were laying down, with a few still grazing the flowers in the orchard towards the edge of the herd. I was able to get maybe 100 feet away from the herd before one of the stragglers looked up at me. Leafy greens and a red petal hanging out of its mouth as it chewed. I slowly set my bag down and quietly opened it up to pull out an apple, never breaking my stare at the animal as it finished its mouthful. A few other elk had noticed me, though they also just stared as I slowly waved the apple around to get one's attention. "Hey buddy, want a snack?" "Want an apple?" I said, as Arai kept looking at the elk that had first seen me. Surprisingly enough, it did take a step forward. It didn't run over. I'm not a fairy tale princess or anything, but it did cautiously and slowly begin to approach. Despite its size, it almost seemed to glide over with how smoothly and cautiously it got walked. The elk's head stayed low and turned to the side to look at me better, and I'm no expert on any animal's body language, so I was ready to run if it decided to charge. It walked closer, looking between myself and the apple. The elk was maybe 10 feet out when the smell hit me. Lavender. I chuckled a little. Guy probably spent the day in the stuff. Honestly seemed kind of nice. When it got even closer, I could see more clearly the way it was moving. It was weird. The hooves barely touched the ground with each step, and its movements reminded me more of a cat trying to be quiet rather than elk being careful or curious. I sat down the apple in front of me and took a step back. Again, I'm not the elk whisperer or something, so I didn't expect it to eat from my hand. It walked past the apple. I think it was a he at least, just ignored the apple completely. This weird animal almost stepped on it, closing the distance. I froze up. I could hear it sniffing the air and then my shirt as it stood right in front of me, sniffing my chest. The size and sharpness of its antlers began to really set in. I'd seen elk die from charging each other full force with these things. Even one quick head flick would be enough to take an eye out. Ha, cute little guy, aren't you?" I said shakily, reaching down to scratch the large guy. Its head raised up as it began to smell the front pocket of my jacket, and all at once. I felt its fur, rough, not like fur with mud or dust from living in the wilderness, but almost like bristles on a boar. The hairs were stiff and almost sharp. Part of me thought this was because maybe it was sick. I was pulled back to the moment as I felt the pressure of a light nip on my jacket. This guy was nibbling on the pocket. I nervously chuckled. "You like this jacket, bud? Lucky day for you, Lucky. Could be a cute name for an elk, if not way too cute for something this big." Then it hit me. These guys had been snacking on plants and herbs all day. He might have smelled more. I opened up the pocket and the elk stuck its nose and mouth in there. I started laughing. Even through the flannel jacket it tickled a little, until it wiggled its nose back out. It had the bags in its mouth, and was chewing, even the one with the ash in it. The smile on my face faded as I watched its head turn too. Look directly at me, front of the head facing me. I watched the pupils move independently, slowly moving to look at me head on. The chewing got louder as it kept staring at me. My heart dropped as I heard it. Lucky came out of its throat, like some was trying to force out a word with a mouthful of rocks. My voice. It said it in my voice. I froze. Its lips began to curl inwards, and the corners of its mouth began going back farther than any animal's should. Lucky, it forced out again, the words coming out after its lips moved like a badly dubbed movie. The sound of dust and plastic grinding on. Teeth finished with the small ziplock containing the ash broke open. Whatever this thing was, its strangely white teeth turned grey from the ashes. It licked the ash from its teeth. Before I ran, I swear I saw its eyes move, not that it was tracking me. The eyeballs moved, slithering like golf balls through wet clay from their sockets to the front. The ever-widening smile kept crawling back, until the edges slithered up the sides of its head. A sickening wet popping sound accompanying it until the corners of the mouth almost touched the new home of its eyes. I ran. The only thing on my mind was the sound of my heart in my ears from fear. I looked back behind to see if it was going to come after me, only to see, in the last few minutes of sunlight, its silhouette was stationary. The antler tips began to move, almost wriggling in place. As I ran, I could still feel the eyes piercing through me. By the time I got back into the town proper, the sun was down. I saw porch lights being turned on as I sprinted down the uneven road. Looking over my shoulder every few seconds, I heard nothing except for my boots on the gravel and saw nothing, except for the occasional stray cat that sprinted across the road. For a moment I swore I saw one of the blinds snap closed as I ran past, my heart still in my ears as I kept running. I got back to my grandmother's house and crashed through. The door, I hadn't locked it, but in the moment I was thankful. I didn't. I'm writing this now in hopes someone can help me understand what I saw. Reading this over, I sound insane. I grew up with stories and warnings about shape changes of multiple kinds, but this thing ate the herbs that supposedly warded off many of them. I'm posting this here because Todd kept mentioning this site before we graduated, saying people posted their experiences with the paranormal and sometimes people had answers. If anyone has any ideas of what just happened, please let me know. If anything happens tomorrow or tonight, I'll keep people updated. Story 4 ends here and now. We enter the fog of Story 5. For months, he'd been in the background of my AI-generated images. I didn't notice until it was too late. By March, 3 months after he started appearing in the background of my AI-generated images, Clemens had developed a fully realized corporeal form. His pixels became skin and sinew. His ink turned to hot blood. Although he'd given up on escaping the small windowless room at the center of my apartment, a space that used to be my home office, he had not died. His motherless flesh appeared distinctly human, but he'd gone weeks without a sip of water. His faux heart seemed to beat, but he hadn't caked the room in shit and piss during his months-long incarceration. I never noticed a fetid odor creeping out from underneath the barricaded doorway, at least Dot. Although Clemens shares our form, he's free from our demanding physiology. That doesn't mean he lacks our sense of hunger. Quite the contrary, he yearns for something with a feverish intensity, judging by the way his voice cracked when he pleaded an activity he did indefinitely. Since he was born, the hunger must be agonizing. I empathized with the poor anomaly. Truly I did. In a certain light, I suppose I was responsible for him as well. But no matter how loudly he shrieked, I wouldn't be the martyr to his hunger. I want to crawl inside of you, he begged, slamming his fists against the wall shared. Between my office and bedroom, Clemens required a permanent solution. He wouldn't starve. I couldn't kill him, and the neighbors were beginning to ask questions. After an exhaustive review of the projects I had sold in the last year, I pinpointed when he first infiltrated my work. December 10th, 2024, a picture labeled girl.commission.12-4 on my hard drive in the foreground, leaning on the edge of a picnic table. There's a young woman, slim, bright blue eyes, colorful, tattoos running down her left arm, sporting a confident grin to match her revealing tank top. Can't recall if the goal was to sell the high-end looking rollerblades on her feet or the cola she's holding up to her mouth. Nor can I recall which pieces of the picture were real and which were exaggerated. Now that I'm really thinking about it, maybe the image was an ad for a fledgling tattoo shop. It's unclear, and I have a bad habit of labeling image files something unhelpfully vague, like picture 844 or untyped lead. A shiver galloped over my shoulders when I spotted him. Clemens, an unassuming stick figure looming alone. On the desert's horizon, he was barely perceptible. Before anyone asks, I don't remember why there's a picnic table in the desert. I'm aware it's out of place. Maybe it's an error, maybe it's not. Pretty sure you can't rollerblade across sand either. It isn't my job to make it make sense. I create what's requested. If the client is happy, they send over some cash. If they aren't happy or they don't pay me, no big deal. No hard feelings and no time wasted. I didn't spend days and then hunched over a desk in a dark room like a medieval monk copying the Bible by hand, only to be denied compensation. The grief of being an artist for hire. Been there, done that. Never again, let me put it this way. I willingly missed my father's funeral. I unabashedly slept with my best friend's wife. I've made some grave mistakes. Still, if I was given the opportunity to change the past, if I was gifted the power to reverse one mistake in my life, I'd choose a career at Taco Bell, as opposed to drawing for commission. Ain't no truer heartbreak than forcing something you love to turn a profit. Business is a violent corruption. It infects even the holiest of pursuits, swims through its veins like the flu, making it sickly and diseased and weak. Once you realize what you've done, the harm you've caused, it's far too late. The corruption is inseparable. The thing that gave your life purpose has become irreparably defiled. It's not the same, not like it was before, and it'll never be the same. For those non-artists out there, I can help you relate. Imagine pimping out your spouse to make ends meet. The pain, I'd theorize, is pretty close. Anyway, I generated that image. Girl.commission.12-4 around Christmas. Clemens was present. Then, and he's remained present ever since then. In the next project, he was in the same place, deep in the background, a little right of center, but he was slightly bigger. Same with the next picture. Identical location and a tiny bit larger. A dozen images later, he'd tripled in size. So on and so on and so on. The system didn't always generate his human form. I think I would have noticed that quicker. In one photo, his contours were constructed from lines of foam on the ocean. In another, I saw his screaming mouth framed by strings of pasta. No matter the contents of the image, once Clemens appeared, never left. He doesn't have the most memorable face, no. His visage is decidedly average. short brown hair with narrow eyes and a hooked nose. The only notable feature was his mouth, perpetually fixed open in the shape of a screen, but on a cursory inspection, that didn't even strike me as alarming. I breezed over his wailing expression hundreds of times without noticing. It just didn't stand out. Initially, my brain didn't flag the profound distress as abnormal. However, once I stared for long enough, once I really matched his gaze, the truth became apparent. I shot up from my kitchen table and sent the chair clattering to the floor. Behind me, shrieking like a goddamned banshee. Simply put, he's empty. Truly and utterly empty. Even the dead aren't empty. Not like Clemens. He's a creature abandoned, not only by God, but by the devil as well. The virtuous and the damned may seem completely antithetical to each other, but they both, at least, have substance, not him. He's absence made flesh, and he was born within the confines of my home office. That night, a familiar noise jolted me awake. I sprang upright in bed, wading through the thick stupor of aborted sleep to orient myself to the pitch-black room. The rhythmic chugging of machinery curled into my ears. What the hell is the printer doing on at 3 a.m? I sighed, and swung my legs over the side of the bed. Finally, time to send the old boy out to pasture. I grumbled, getting to my feet. The mercy killing was long overdue. My printer was older than sin, and it looked the part. A large, unwieldy block of yellow-grey plastic that shook the desk from the clunky force of its work. Not only was the technology embarrassingly cumbersome, but it was also glitchy as all. Hell, a single particle of dust, if conniving enough, could very easily drift through the cracks in its chassis and wedge itself between two of its geriatric gears, stalling their weary motion and creating a system-wide shutdown. Enough was enough, though. I rounded the corner, creaking open the door to my home office, intent on turning it off for good. I had the money to replace the damn thing, just never got around to it. This, however, was the last straw. When I flicked on the light, my footsteps slowed to a stop. A slight twinge of fear wormed its way up my throat. Asterisk, asterisk for all its flaws. The singular upside to my printer was its generous capacity. It could hold more than 1,000 sheets at a time, and that quality was on full display. Apparently, the device had been active for a while before its chaotic sputtering woke me up. A vast puddle of printed images laid at its feet. Some were upright, some were face down, but they all seemed to depict the same thing. I crept closer. The machine continued to quake and thunder. I reached out a tremulous hand and pulled the freshest sheet from the tray before it, slid forward into the pile of ink and paper below. My eyes squinted as I scanned the picture from corner to corner, flipped it upside down, trying to better grasp what I was looking at. No matter how contorted the image, though an epiphany eluded me, it was just a face, a man with brown hair, narrow eyes, and a hooked nose, so claustrophobically close to the picture's point of reference that his features had become out of focus and blurry. Suddenly, my fingers let go. Fear didn't cause me to drop the picture. I hadn't stared long enough to appreciate his emptiness. Not yet. No, it was dizziness. In the blink of an eye, the image developed an impossible depth. It became more like I was peering at a reflection in a mirror rather than a image, and the shift in perception made me feel intensely off balance and devastatingly nauseous as it fluttered to the floor. My gaze drifted to some of the other upright images in the pile. I recognized some of them, or rather, their shared foundation. They were made for my most recent commissioned project, which involved inserting an AI-made studio audience behind an actual photo of an up-and-coming comedian, bleachers cramped, with procedurally generated humans, smiling and laughing and cheering on the budding celebrity. The picture landed gently aside the pile, face up. Without warning, the printer stilled. The resulting silence, a silence cleansed of the rhythmic chugging, was somehow deafening in comparison. I didn't need to examine all 300 plus images to understand, at least on a superficial level, what was transpiring. The face in the picture belonged to one of the audience members. Initially, he sat right of center frame. With each doctored snapshot, however, the man got slightly closer. The photos were a time-lapse of him approaching. A soft, wet crinkling caught my ear. The process was subtle at first. I attempted to soothe my reeling psyche. Surely I was hallucinating, or dreaming, or suffering from some sort of brain infection. As if to refute my laundry list of flimsy rationalizations, the crinkling intensified. He was gaining momentum. His face began emerging from the picture I dropped. The tip of his nose and portions of his cheeks would materialize for a few seconds, only to fall back within the confines of the image, like he was fighting to buoy himself above the waters of a tempestuous ocean. A thin but sturdy membrane encased his skin. When exposed to the dryness of the air, that ethereal packaging seemed to shrivel and desiccate. The resulting noise was like crinkling plastic wrap. A complete face surfaced for a moment and then submerged, which was followed seconds later by a face and a neck, and finally by a face, neck, shoulder, and arm. Once he had an arm out and anchored to the floor, he no longer sunk below the surface. He set 2 elbows on the floor, put his hands to his face, and ripped into the dehydrated amnion encasing his body. As the membrane tore, a guttural, waterlogged scream erupted from his infant lungs. He didn't need to breathe, so it didn't need to stop. The howl spun around his vocal cords indefinitely, never losing its shape or shedding its pain. I sprinted out of the room. I remember pushing the wardrobe in front of the closed office door. I recall pacing aimlessly around my apartment, scratching at my face in a moment of temporary insanity. Convinced I was covered in my own ethereal packaging, I'd just been unaware of it my entire life. Eventually, I calmed down enough to blare a semi-coherent question at the trapped entity. What the hell do you want? His wailing did not abate, but that did not interfere with his ability to answer the question. A deep, craggy voice layered itself over the mournful drone. I want to crawl inside of you. Eventually, M's arrived. I don't remember calling them, but there's a lot I don't remember about that night. I let them in and moved to the barricade, but I refused to follow them into the office, which had since become impenetrably dark. Seconds later, they started screaming too, but their agony only lasted for a moment, and then it was gone. They were gone without saying a word. I quickly pushed the wardrobe back in front of the door and collapsed onto the hallway floor. No one else ever called 911. Despite living on the 6th floor of a cramped apartment complex, neighbors above, below, and flanking my home on both sides, no police ever came knocking. Pistols drawn with the assumption that murder was taking place behind my apartment's front door. Given the ceaseless screaming dot, it's as if nobody could hear him but me, but that turned out to be incorrect. The truth of the matter was much stranger. I trudged through those first few sleepless days as nothing more than a pathetic ball of anxiety, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Surely, heal, escape. He'll flatten himself to the thickness of a pancake and slide under the barrier, or he'll just phase through the wall and appear on the other side. Nope, he never left. Fortunately, he took breaks from screaming. They were small breaks though. An hour here, an hour there. I wanted to get away from the screaming for more than 60 minutes at a time, but that meant I'd have to leave him alone in my apartment. What if he broke free? What if someone finally reported his cat to the authorities? Wouldn't it be worse, legally speaking, if I wasn't there to explain the situation? A week passed, and nothing changed. I didn't find that reassuring, but I began to acclimate. There was a certain combination of exhaustion, whiskey, and apathy that, when blended in exactly the right ratio, allowed me more than 5 minutes of sleep at a time. I started noticing that the man across the hall would spy on me through a slight crack in his door every time I left the apartment. He didn't look angry. The grizzled, middle-aged Italian wore a big, toothy grin as he monitored me, an expression I'd never seen him make before then. Sometime later, he knocked on my door. The clock on my stove read midnight. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen before I answered, hiding it behind my back as I creaked it open and stuck my head out. My neighbor, clad in a dirty white t-shirt and boxer briefs, just stood there. I grimaced at the sight of his bare feet, firmly planted on my welcome mat, and the rows of cigarette-stained teeth peeking through his wide smile. He said nothing, so the only noise in that moment was the scream radiating out from my apartment. "Can I help you?" I muttered, the knife's wooden handle becoming slick with sweat. His smile broadened. "SD, yes, the singing. Very, very beautiful, bellissimo. May I come in?" My jaw hit the floor. I slammed the door in his face, but he wasn't upset at me. Double quotes, yes, well, thank you. His voice is angel. The muffled reply twisted my stomach into knots. I said nothing back, and I think he left. The following day, a kid I didn't recognize was sitting beside my door when I was about to leave, desperate to restock my liquor cabinet. He jumped to his feet, wild eyes looking me up and down. I think he considered darting between my legs to get inside, but ultimately decided against it. "Hello, sir. Is Clemens home? Would it be okay if I came in and listened to him sing?" I bent over, suppressing the urge to shoo him away like a fly buzzing around my head. "Ach, hey, where are your parents, bud?" He giggled, and before I could repeat the question, sprinted away. From that point on, they all referred to him as Clemens. Calls from unknown numbers are inquiring about Clemens. Lines of people waiting in the hallway for Clemens. Notes slipped under my door and letters stuffed into my P.O. box addressed to Clemens. There was a perverse equilibrium to their persistence. They were dying to hear him sing. I would have killed to silence his scream. One day I opened the wardrobe, pushed the still hanging clothes aside, and drilled a quarter-sized hole through the wood. When I released the trigger and the worry of the drill stopped, his screaming had also stopped. Pure, quiet darkness poured from the hole. Seconds ticked by with all the urgency of an inner tube floating down a lazy river. My heart slammed against the back of throat. The purple red of his palate appeared from the darkness. Clemens had his. Mouth against the hole. He paused. Then he screamed, his uvula swinging like a motorized chandelier. I put the butt of my pistol up to the hole and fired. 1, 2, 3 shots. The scent of gunpowder coated my nostrils. As the ringing in my ears died down, his screaming dripped back in. As far as I could tell, Clemens was completely intact. The bullets hadn't even stunned him. I covered the hole with the back of a wooden picture frame and nailed it into place. Previously, it had held a photograph of my siblings and me at the boardwalk, but patching the entity's cage seemed like a higher, more important calling in comparison. I released my grip on the hammer and let it clatter to the floor, though I barely heard it above the screaming. My legs felt like stone, aching from how long I'd stood motionless in front of the barricade. Despite the discomfort, my gaze remained fixed on the picture frame. I traced the wood's natural markings from left to right like a line of scripture written in a foreign language, over and over again, surveying its symbols with no grasp of their meaning. The more I studied it, the more I noticed its subtle movement, slightly concave, then slightly convex, bowed in, then pushed out, contracted, then expanded, inhale, exhale. I dashed into my bedroom, pins and needles buzzing across. The soles of my feet, I studied each wall. Only one was moving, the wall separating my office and my bedroom. His cage was breathing, huddled in the corner of my bedroom, half drunk, head spinning, caked in grease from days of not showering. I started typing up a Reddit post. Not this one, mind you. What I posted that day was simply a title, screaming, singing. I want to crawl inside of you, breathing walls. Empty Clemens. Asterisk, asterisk, left the body of the post blank. Further description felt unnecessary. The person I was fishing for, if they existed, wouldn't need it. Hours passed. Afternoon turned to dusk. Although the room went dark, I stayed put. I waited, sipping from a glass bottle while watching the wall, praying that someone would send me a message or comment on the post. The breathing was no longer subtle. During inhales, the plaster sunk in a few inches at the center. During exhales, the entire wall bulged outwards. I should just leave, I contemplated. The thought of the people waiting outside my apartment, however, put the consideration to rest. It didn't matter when I tried to sneak out. They were always there. They never attempted to break down the door. Like Clemens, they were patient. Vibrations on my thigh caused me to drop the mostly empty bottle. Someone was calling from a restricted number. Disappointed, I silenced it. If I have to hear someone asking, is Clemens home? Or can you just have him sing into the phone? I'm going to put my head through a fucking wall. But they called again. Then a third time. Then a fourth. That was unusual. Typically, they didn't make multiple calls in rapid succession. On a whim, I picked up. Before I could even get out a liquor-soaked hello, a female-sounding voice on the other end said, "Who's?" "Your handler." Her tone was flat, and her syllables were curt, but there was an undeniable urgency in the way she spoke. To Dot, as I was about to answer, a bout of acid reflux leapt up my throat. While I worked on choking the bile back into my stomach, she continued her interrogation. I said, "Who's your handler, Rasgasmos?" "Isro CNSA." I chuckled. Then I experienced a full-on belly laugh. My sides throbbed. Tears welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. Eventually, I suppressed my wheezing fits long enough to respond. "Lady, I make shitty pictures for cereal brands you've never heard of." Retrospectively, it was an odd and cryptic response, but she seemed to get the idea. "You're a civilian." I nodded. When I realized she wouldn't be able to hear my nod, I responded, "Yes, ma'am." This seemed to unnerve her. She paused for a while, and I waited, struggling to suppress a giggle here and there. "Explain to me what you're seeing," she demanded. I gave her an exceptionally abbreviated version of the events I've described here. Once I got to the part where the walls started breathing, she interrupted me. "Listen closely. I need you to find one of two things: either a large mirror or a TV made before 2007. Then move the barricade. Place the TV or the mirror in front of the door. Open the door. The grift Clemens will leave to find you. He's desperate to hollow you out. Most likely, he'll accidentally get stuck. He'll enter the TV or the mirror and won't be able to determine a way out. If the grift Clemens is adequately contained, you should be able to see his reflection in the object. When it's done, call me back at XXXXXXXXX. Write the number down. By that point, I was already pulling the flat screen off of my bedroom wall. Phone nestled between my shoulder and my ear. Repeat those instructions back to me, she barked. Old TV or big mirror should be able to see his reflection. Call you back at XXXXXXX. The line clicked. She hung up, whoever that woman was. However, she learned of my post and figured out how to contact me. She gave me exactly what I was hoping for. She was a miracle, no other way to put it. A true godsend, whether out of fear or just plain laziness. I couldn't justify killing myself, nor could I justify leaving the apartment, but I needed Clemens gone. Her instructions were a beautiful workaround to that standstill. Either they would work or they wouldn't. If I didn't manage to contain him, then I'd probably die. Seemed like a win-win. I paced into the hallway, set the TV down, and began pushing the wardrobe out of the way. The volume of his screams grew louder. I stepped into my office for the first time in weeks. Other than a thick layer of soggy dust settled across every inch of the room, not much had really changed. With Clemens trapped, the walls ceased breathing. Weirdly, I sort of missed the rhythmic movements, but I suppose that's neither here nor there. I'm alive. All's well that ends well. That said, I think I may have made a small mistake. Yes, the TV was old, but it wasn't that old. Certainly not older than 2007. I assumed it would still work. When Clemens sprinted out of the room, sinking into the screen as soon as he made contact, I assumed it was all okay. I even saw his reflection. The problem, I only saw his reflection for a few minutes. Then he disappeared. Maybe that's just, I don't know, part of the process. I thought I attempted to call the woman back, but I couldn't remember her phone number. Still, I wasn't worried. Clemens was gone. The people camping outside my apartment had dispersed. No one ever came looking for the EMS workers that vanished, and the dust wasn't too hard to clean up. My life went back to normal, a diluted, tenuous version of normal anyway. I suppressed the memories, came close to convincing myself it was all some fever dream a handful of times. That was until I was flicking through the channels one afternoon and saw a man with short brown hair, narrow eyes, and a hooked nose, sitting amongst a group of reporters during a press conference. He was on the next channel to loading packages, onto a truck in the background of some medical drama. He wasn't watching where he was going either. He was looking straight at the camera. I googled what changed about TVs in 2007, curious as to why that date was so important. Apparently, that's the year they got Bluetooth. This is not a confession. I just figured I should alert someone. Similar to before, he's getting incrementally closer, bigger every time I check. Like I said at the top, though I make what I'm asked to make, no more, no less. My recommendation, keep your TVs off. Whatever happens from here, whether you choose to, listen or don't, it won't be my fault.